Welcome to the Smith Publicity All Things Book Marketing Podcast, offering tips, insights, and advice from the best in the publishing industry.
Hello, and welcome to this episode of All Things Book Marketing. I'm your host, Olivia McCoy, and in our 2024 first episode, I have best-selling author, Selena Rezvani joining me. Hi, Selena.
Hi, Olivia. Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. A little background on Selena, because we know each other very well. We've worked together in the past. But Selena Rezvani is a recognized speaker, leadership consultant, and the best-selling, award-winning author of several books, including Quick Confidence from May 2023 last year, Pushback, published in 2012, and The Next Generation of Women Leaders, published back in 2009. That's a lot that you've got accomplished in all that time.
I know you kind of get the book authorship bug, and it's easy to want to go back for more.
So in this month, January 2024, we're focusing on bestseller campaigns and best-selling books and kind of trying to figure out and debunk that process for a lot of our listeners and watchers. So I'm really excited to talk to an author who's been through that process and get your perspective. So I'd love for you to begin just by telling us more about your publishing pathway to success and what that looks like for you in your books.
Yes. Well, I want to say that the bestseller status was not an overnight thing. I know it'd be a great story if I could say that it was, but in my own case, it wasn't. It really was trial and error, learning along the way. And only happened this year. So just to kind of share my publishing journey, in 2009, I was working at a management consulting firm on people issues, leadership development, and I was getting an MBA at night. And one aspect of that MBA was that you could direct your own research. And I knew just what I wanted to do, Olivia. I was like so excited by my idea. I wanted to interview women leaders at the top of their game. The only problem was I didn't know a single one. I had zero connections to any of them. But I had one female professor at Johns Hopkins, and she said, Selena, I'll approve your research under one condition: to do interviews with these women. She said, you have to go after the giants. You have to go after the women you think won't even entertain an email from you, let alone something more. And I'm so grateful to her for doing that. Lindsay Thompson was her name. And I hope all of us can be a Lindsay for somebody on their publishing journey, but because of her prompt, I reached out to rock star women I admired tremendously. And so many of them said yes. The CEO of the Washington Post, the president of the LA Dodgers at the time, CEO of Bigelow Teas, CEO of Papyrus, the wonderful stationery company, and those interviews changed my life. And I realized I'm not that unique. There's other women and people who could benefit from these inspiring stories and accelerate their own advancement and their career success. And I thought I'd like to pitch this to a publisher. And that set of research became my first book, The Next Generation of Women Leaders, in 2009. I had no agent. I pitched that book myself to an academic publisher that was owned by Houghton Mifflin Harcourt, and they said yes. And it was a tiny advance, but they were helpful and they were willing, and I was thrilled, honestly. So that was book number one. I quit my corporate job and I began speaking and opened my own business focused on women's leadership, and really grateful to that first book for that. I'm not sure I would have had the nerve, and the courage to do it, but something about that book, it felt like a calling card. It helped me get into really big, exciting companies to speak, or exciting colleges and universities. And as I went, I started to notice the kind of primacy of advocating for oneself in their career, both in the advice I was learning from women leaders, but also in my own writing. I was writing my own column for the Washington Post on women in leadership. And I thought, I want to write my next book about that. Mm-hmm. The research at that time had said women negotiated 4 times less than men. And I wanted to explore some of the effects on one's career, given that. And of course, provide some solutions. And so my next book was Pushback, How Smart Women Ask and Stand Up for What They Want. And that's been a thrill. That came out in 2012 at the same time as having twins, just
Wow.
months ago. So I could plan it that way. And that's the funny thing about books, right? Is they don't always map, seamlessly to life and your realities of your life. But that was a thrill. It was a different experience. I reached out to an agent in New York City, Doris Michaels, and she helped me pitch that book. So it was a different experience. And I ended up with 2 offers and chose Wiley. And that was a really happy home for me as an author. That book did well and was a little bit more of a slow burn. And I'm actually today writing the second edition
Ooh,
of.
exciting.
Yeah, I'm very excited to see it come back out. And then fast forward to pandemic times, 2020, like so many other people in the world who were feeling job insecurity, worries, about everything from their health and safety and loved ones to the job market. I noticed so many people's confidence tanking. And it prompted me to start a weekly newsletter on LinkedIn called Quick Confidence. And that's the first thing I ever did that went viral. That was really, you know, met by an engaged community who I'm so grateful to. And that became my third book, my most recent one, just out May of 2023, Quick Confidence. And that was my first bestseller out of the gate.
Wow. I love to see a great example of how being an author really builds you up and how continuing with it and really diving into it can help so much with your career pathway and future books. And it's so hard to tell an author who's really struggling through their first book that it's worth it and it's going to be so much easier the next time around when you know what you're doing a little bit more. And so it's nice to have you say that. Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's like any daunting yet exciting goal. You might compare it to running a marathon or a half marathon or, some kind of personal commitment or resolution you're making in a year to do something consistently that maybe scares you a little bit.
Mhm.
The way I like to think about it is you're either going to win or you're going to learn. It's like crowd
Yeah.
out the notion of failure. You're either going to win or you're going to learn, and those are good things.
So tell us about the times that your books have won. Let's talk about what happened for you. So you were a bestseller out the gate with this book. What happened? What did that look like? What was your path to getting there?
It looked like the most exciting email you could ever imagine getting as an author, from my publisher, saying, don't look now, but you're number 4 on the Wall Street Journal bestseller list. And just, I mean, the thrill of all thrills. Um, and that meant a huge amount. It also hit the Publishers Weekly bestseller list that same week. So this is in mid-May, right with the book coming out. And so I think when you find out that you hit that bestseller status, there's kind of the logical side of it, which is, the facts and figures side of things, which is that factually your book sold more copies than others potentially in its category. And that's thrilling and exciting by itself, those hard numbers, that kind of logical math reality of things. I think for me, though, there's an even more meaningful part, which was the representation part
Yeah.
of being a best-selling author. Um, I'm a woman of color, and while women make up something like half of published authors, people of color make up less than a quarter.
Hmm.
So the thought of being even like a tiny force in changing the face of what authorship looks like, to maybe encourage somebody else to get out there and pitch that book concept or write that book or self-publish, but to put their work forward,
Mhm.
um, that's like the icing on the authorship cake.
I can tell you when we got that email in the office, we passed it around to the whole team and we were all screaming, jumping out of our chairs, dancing around the office. We were so excited for you too. That was an incredible day.
Thank you. I felt the love.
Good. I'm so glad. So what do you think helped get you to that bestseller? I mean, obviously your content really spoke to people and that helped with sales, and obviously you had a platform that you were reaching out to, but let's talk a little bit about what got the book to that bestseller status.
Yeah, I worked pretty exhaustively on a bulk pre-sale strategy with larger clients who actually knew me, who I had worked with. And I learned something during the pandemic, something I didn't know before. When I was looking for a sponsor for a live show I was doing, I had never asked for a sponsor for anything in my entire life. So, no experience there. But when I went to do research, who's most likely to sponsor an event, it said people who have paid you in the past. And that's such a simple, straightforward concept. And yet it hadn't occurred to me. And I kind of used that same thinking. And by the way, it helped me get a sponsor who I loved working with for that live show, going to someone who had already paid me for a speaking event.
Hmm.
And in this case, I applied that same thinking. Um, you know, Start with who you have in your corner, start with who's in your community and world, and who's been willing to maybe make a bet on you, or take a chance. There were so many people who brought me in for speaking, not once but a couple times. And that's the tricky thing about a pre-sale strategy, meaning before the book's ever out, is you're asking people to buy a thing that doesn't yet exist, and maybe they can read the manuscript. But we all, in this day and age, we like to see and feel and touch something and kind of experience it before we make a bet on it. And I think that's really understandable. So I think it's a special person you're looking to tap. That was certainly the case for me. I also asked for pre-sales. As a content creator, I create content for TikTok and Instagram and LinkedIn 5 days a week, every week, around career advancement. And asking those individuals, it can be a vulnerable thing for sure to do that, to reach out and say, hey, would you, first of all, look at this? Would you support me by purchasing it? Would you share it with others, if it makes a difference in your life? And like I said, there's a lot of vulnerability that comes with that. The one other thing I did that I think helped with my pre-sale strategy, the bulk pre-sales to corporations, which is getting in the hundreds purchased, right, at one time, was offering new incentives and like goodies, add-ons that I had never offered before. And so, for example, if somebody bought between 50 and 250 copies, they got one kind of incentive or bonus. It might have been a webinar thrown in with that book purchase, right? That I would facilitate. But if it was 251 to 500 books, it might be an in-person book signing and an in-person talk to go with that book series, and so on. And sometimes clients want to create a hybrid solution. And of course, that was easy to work with those and accommodate those. So I don't think there's one way. I'm not sure my way necessarily works for every author. But I think it can really get your book off to a running start, to
Hmm.
lean into who who you have those trust-based relationships with, who's shown up for you in the past, and start there, and offer, think creatively, offer those extra goodies, because it was not a big deal to offer a webinar and deliver it, or a follow-up coaching session, or whatever we may have included.
Well, and what really strikes me from what you just said is the partnership between your branding and your career and your book, and how they kind of work in tandem together to get you to this place. I mean, so many authors, there's a misconception within the industry that if a book is good, it's going to be a bestseller because people will recognize that it's good and then they'll buy it and then the book will just hit those sales numbers. But what they're not realizing is that people aren't going to come across the book naturally without there being some kind of promotion, without there being some back end work. And the publishing partnerships that you make along the way aren't able to do it alone. It really is a lot of work from the author. And so I love that you're talking about you literally used everything that we talk about all the time in consulting and in a lot of those branding conversations we have is you had social media going and you had your platform working and you were writing and you were speaking and you were talking and then you were leveraging those connections and all of that momentum that you've built for yourself in helping the book, and then the book then comes back and helps you with your brand, and it's a positive feedback loop that we really encourage authors to work towards.
That's right. And I think it can be hardest to start.
Yes.
I think it's easier. It's kind of like riding a bike. It's always harder to get that stationary bike in motion and get your feet and your weight balanced and all of that stuff than it is to change your speed, maybe when you're already going. And that's one thing that I think can be really tricky for authors is waiting to start platform building until a book release. If you can have those wheels in motion, it will really help you.
Well, and it's also easier to build a platform when you already have some momentum going. I know. I do use your social media and your website all the time as an example for authors to look towards. I mean, I really do love the way that you've gone about talking about yourself and your brand and your book, and you do it so authentically that it's something I really push authors. Take a look at Selena's page, look at the videos that she's making, look at the website and how she really advocates for herself and for other people that can be helped by her content. Take a look at that, learn from that, try to emulate some of that. But then I would love for you to quickly, how long did it take you to build that platform? Because I know when you start off, it's so hard to see, oh, I'm only gaining 5 followers a month. I'm only getting so much interaction. And then it kind of snowballs. But at what point did it start to really gain momentum and build for you?
It wasn't even across platforms. I was slow to get to, for example, Instagram. I was late to that party. I waited until the pandemic to even open an account and really start. And it was the feeling that uh, some of the initial plays I made in 2020, like a live show on LinkedIn, right? Which is where you're streaming live, in my case, with a guest who I was interviewing, um, got a positive response. And I really enjoyed, during a time of tremendous isolation, having a sense of community, learning from others and being able to share that in real time with people who are hungry to advance and to not feel so alone either. And that's really what pushed me to kind of start these social accounts. And so I did it in Instagram and I did it with TikTok. I want to say like in 2020 or 2021. And there were so many times that it felt cringy, so cringy to put yourself out there, um, and give the 3 tips that you think might help somebody, or share a personal anecdote that was hard for you in your own career, or whatever it was. It was so hard to do that without a huge amount of overthinking. And was that good enough? And that's already something in my own life I need to work on, that perfectionistic side. And so I have to say, one of the unexpected things about doubling down on discipline and consistently creating, I made a promise to myself to do it 5 days a week and really kind of see it more as a focus group. This is a group that can respond and tell me if this is a really interesting idea or concept and needs more exploration, and tell us more about that. Or, you know what? This isn't so new. This has been said. People aren't really responding to it. It's not my only input, but it's certainly one important input. Um, and I think the other thing is doing that that disciplined, I'm going to create, even if I'm not struck by the arrow of inspiration today, I'm still going to create and show up and do it. I think has helped me release some of that inner critic and perfectionistic side of me, that it's got to be just so and polished and perfect before you put it out there. And so that's hard enough. That was one mountain I think to climb. But then I think noticing I'm only getting 5 followers every 60 days, it can be disheartening. There's no way I could pretend that I didn't notice that or track it, frankly. But here's the wonderful thing about planting a forest rather than planting a one perfect prize petunia. You do not know what's going to hit and resonate with people, sometimes in an explosive way, in a viral way. And that's what happened with me. I had decent growth. It was slowed coming, but I had a pretty decent growth on Instagram and LinkedIn and TikTok. And then I made a video one day about using silence effectively when negotiating. And that went viral. I was with my son at a bouncy house type place, and I'll never forget just being shocked at what a reaction it was getting. And that, begot more ideas and, more traction and growth. So give it a chance. It might take 5 times longer than you think, than you hope, than you wish. In my case, though, it's really been worth it.
Another point for consistency. We'll take it.
Yeah, like showing up, right?
Mhm.
Stringing together that string of pearls of consistency and knowing no one day, no one effort has to be perfect.
And that consistency has helped you get to where you are now, which is such an incredible place to be. What has being named a best-selling author done for you? What has the impact been? What happens after you become a best-selling author? Or what happened for you, I should say.
Yeah, I think uh, it's a little tempting to kind of downplay best-selling status, I have to be honest, and kind of play it off as like, oh, the titles and the trophies or whatever don't mean much. But I have to say, to be a best-selling author can really be a door opener. It can be a credibility booster. It can lead to bigger collaborations and partnerships with organizations, right? That's something I do in my line of work. It can help you command higher speaking fees. That's something I do in my line of work as well. And of course, I think it makes pitching and publishing future books or just works a lot easier.
Mhm.
I mean, a lot easier. That you have a certain track record. It really de-risks, your future projects in, I think, publishers' eyes. And I'd say even on a smaller scale, like pitching your articles to media that you might be writing, um, I think you're more likely to get a yes.
What are some ways that you specifically used that title? Where was it promoted? How was it used? How has it changed the way that you promote yourself? I mean, I know you mentioned some doors that it opens, but let's talk about like specific examples if you're able to share them.
Yeah, well, one awesome thing was Wiley immediately changed the cover. So
Yeah.
actually recognized the Wall Street Journal bestseller status with a sticker for our existing stock of books, or in the case of brand new books that were yet to be printed, included that designation on the book. So that's really exciting and means something. And sometimes people will comment on it when I'm giving them a book or doing a book signing or something like that. But on your LinkedIn profile, I think is a great place where certainly your headline where you're summarizing what you do or what you teach or what you are, that best-selling author of, or Wall Street Journal best-selling author of blank, I think is important and can go a long way. Um, in my pitches to companies, for
Mhm.
sure, whether it's a PowerPoint deck or maybe it's a proposal, written out about what I can bring and what I offer. And then I think the newest one has been with partnerships. I do partnerships with, over social media with companies that might like to collaborate, like Adobe or Oracle, or different companies. MetLife is another one I partnered with who might want to get their message out. And so being able to leverage that bestseller and best-selling author status with them is meaningful. Um, because they want a credible person doing that spokesperson work for them.
So exciting. I'm so glad that it has been such a good, positive experience for you. I really feel like you've put in the work and the time and the effort, and I'm so glad that it's paying off in such a positive way.
Well, thank you. And I want to say one reality of it is so many of my author friends and I have agreed on this, which is it is incredibly exhausting. It is a like morning, noon, and night. And I realize how dramatic that sounds. Presence in your mind when you are either launching a book or newly have launched it. It feels like every waking second of your life, this is taking up time. And I want to acknowledge that because it's not all sunshine and bottomless mimosas. It's exhaustion. It can be you know, finding out what works for you through trial and error. It can be those moments where you almost feel nauseated writing a post about your book for the 17th time, this summer or this month or whatever,
Mhm.
because you just feel like, oh, am I self-promoting too much? And so I think a lot of us go through that. Um, have a support kind of community, partner with some other authors who understand that. I think it can really help normalize your feelings.
What is your number one piece of advice for authors that are getting started or are already in it? They're working on their second book, third book. In general, your number one piece of advice for fellow authors.
I think it would be that no successful author is an island, that don't try to do it all yourself. You might think it's like clever to, I'll save money and I'll just do it myself. Or I don't want to bother so and so, I'll just do it myself. It is so tempting to do that. I really get it. But wherever you can, I would lean the other way. I would build in more help. I would, more collaboration, more partnership than you think you will need. It could be an intern to help you make specific pitches to corporations. It could be engaging with Smith, with a great PR company, that knows what they're doing to do full media pitching on your behalf. It could be having a very savvy graphic designer part-time who helps you with graphics to put posts out there about your book and your work. Could be a social media person, again, part-time, helping you a couple hours a week. The point is, it really takes a village
Yes.
um, to create a bestseller, and you need to embrace some of that vulnerability that comes with that, which is, again, reaching out, depending on others, outsourcing in some cases, asking people to look at your work. So there's a beautiful proverb I think about a lot with this, an African proverb, and it's if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And I really believe in that when
Mhm.
it comes to book success.
Well, thank you so much for talking with us today. It's always a pleasure speaking with you.
Well, thank
I'd
you.
love for you to tell us and our readers, our listeners, watchers, how they can get in touch and learn more about you and your future projects and past projects too.
Yeah, I would welcome that. I am at selenarezvani.com. That's my website. And I create 5 days a week. Like I said, my handle on TikTok and Instagram is Selena Rezvani. And you can also connect with me on LinkedIn. I write my weekly newsletter still called Quick Confidence, and it would be great to hear from you.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much. And listeners, watchers, if you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to rate, review, subscribe, and share it with anyone else that might be interested. We'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Smith Publicity All Things Book Marketing Podcast. To reach us and learn about our many services, visit smithpublicity.com or send us an email to info@smithpublicity.com.